In this video, we are going to learn how to do the hand sewing stitch, the cross stitch. For this sample, you will need a single threaded needle, your sewing scissors, your sample fabric, as well as a couple of pins. Now the cross stitch is used to finish hems. The cross stitch also has several other names. It's sometimes called the herringbone stitch. When I was first taught it, it was called the catch stitch. It has several names. So if you happen to be in a costume shop and someone says, "Hey, I need you to finish this hem with this stitch," and it sounds like a stitch you've never heard of before, it's very likely this one. This is the stitch that I've heard called the most number of names. Okay, but this is the cross stitch, not to be confused with the hobby of cross stitching where you make pictures with thread, similar to embroidery. This is just called the cross stitch because our threads do cross each other. So I have already prepared my fabric sample with a folded edge. Like I said before, this is used for hems most often. The cross stitch is the best stitch for doing hems because it actually has a little bit of give to it and is really strong and sturdy. It also is less likely for a performer to accidentally catch the edge and rip it out. So if you're ever wondering what is the best hem, the best stitch for hems, it's the cross stitch. It's this one. Now, with all of our other samples, if you're right-handed like me, you've probably been sewing from your right going towards your left. If you're left-handed, you would have been doing the opposite. You would have been going from left to right. The cross stitch is a different stitch in that you're going to sew backwards. So normally I go right to left, but for this stitch, I have to start on the left side and work my way towards the right. It's very strange. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first cross stitch. So I'm going to start on the left side and I'm going to take just a little stitch on the single layer here. You can do it on the single layer or you can do it on the double layer. But if you do it on the folded edge, do not catch the single side. Okay? I just like to start on the single side because it's easier. So I'm going to take a stitch like normal, but I'm starting on the left side. So my needle is going from right to left, like always. I'm just starting on the left side. Okay, I'm going to pull this through. Now the next stitch I want to take is on the folded edge, and I do want to take it about, I'm just trying to remember, I think half an inch up. You do want a little bit of crisscross over here. Not a whole lot, but you need your stitches far enough onto this edge and onto this edge that they're not going to get ripped out. So I'm going to go towards my right just a little bit, and I'm going to take a stitch like normal, going from right to left, but I am only catching the folded edge. I'm not catching the single edge. Now, by doing my needle going the same direction I'm used to going, if I pull that, what happens is my thread's going to cross itself. So the next stitch I need to take is over here. So see how this thread is starting to cross itself? This is why it's called the cross stitch. So I'm moving the opposite direction from the way I'm used to going. I'm going backwards, but the actual stitches themselves are normal. So I'm going to take a stitch in the single side. My needle's going right to left. I'm going to pull that. So see how at the top it crisscrossed itself? We're going to do that again. Right? This time I am only catching the folded edge. I am not catching the back side or the single side. Crisscross. And I'm going to keep going. One of the tricky parts about this is not getting your threads too terribly crossed. As you pull, having your threads get tangled up with themselves. So I'm taking my stitches just right beside this folded edge, and I'm keeping the top thread over my needle so that it crosses properly. Okay, so just working opposite, you're moving down your line the opposite way that you're used to going, but your individual stitches are the same way you always take them. You're just moving in a different direction. Okay? And we're just trading off, going back and forth between the single layer and the folded layer. When I catch my folded layer, I'm only catching the folded layer. I am not catching the other side. I'm actually, while I'm stitching, I keep my finger underneath right where my needle is so I can feel if I accidentally go all the way through the fabric because I can feel my needle. And we just keep working across. The cross stitch sometimes comes together pretty quick. Just depends on how big your crosses are. I, for some reason, decided to make mine really small, so this will take me a minute. I hope this makes sense. The cross stitch is one of the trickiest ones, which is why I saved it for last in this series. But it is one of the most useful because we do it a lot for hems. It's great because this gives you some room. You could also use the cross stitch to finish hems in knitwear because it's not going to, it's going to stretch with the knitwear, which is great. And because this thread is is crossing itself, it's really nice and secure for performers stepping on their hems. The smaller your crosses are, the sturdier your hem will be. On something really big, like if you're having to hem, I don't know, like a 20-yard skirt. I don't know if that's an exaggeration, but I'm quite sure that it's not. Um, it would get very tedious to hand do a skirt like that. But you would want to try and maintain your crosses the same size all the way down. That's a good goal to have on any sewing piece that you do. Try to keep your stitches the same length all the way across your seam line. All right, we are almost to the end here. I'm going to do one more in my fold and then one more on my single edge. I'm just going to get very close to the edge here. All right. Oop. Come here. All right, and just for security purposes, I'm going to take one more stitch here before I knot off, just to make sure that cross stitch is nice and secure. There we go. And I will show you what this looks like on the flip side. So what you see right now is the wrong side of the garment. It would be on the interior, and this side would be the exterior. So you could take little tiny stitches if you wanted on the single side, if you wanted it more invisible, but something that's this size really probably isn't too big for the stage. Because remember, everything you're sewing is about 30 feet away. That is the cross stitch because it crosses itself.